you could start.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولكل وجهة هو موليها فاستبقوا الخيرات أينما تكونوا يأت بكم الله جميعا إن الله على كل شيء قدير. ومن حيث خرجت فول وجهك شطر المسجد الحرام وإنه للحق من ربك وما الله بغافل عما تعملون. ومن حيث خرجت فول وجهك شطر المسجد الحرام وحيث ما كنتم فولوا وجوهكم شطره لئلا يكون للناس عليكم حجة إلا الذين ظلموا منهم فلا تخشوهم واخشوني ولأتم نعمتي عليكم ولعلكم تهتدون. كما أرسلنا فيكم رسولا منكم يتلو عليكم آياتنا ويزكيكم ويعلمكم الكتاب والحكمة ويعلمكم ما لم تكونوا تعلمون. فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون. ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله فمن حج البيت أو اعتمر فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما ومن تطوع خيرا فإن الله شاكر عليم. إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزلنا من البينات والهدى من بعد ما بيناه للناس في الكتاب أولئك يلعنهم الله ويلعنهم اللاعنون إلا الذين تابوا وأصلحوا وبينوا فأولئك أتوب عليهم وأنا التواب الرحيم. إن الذين كفروا وماتوا وهم كفار أولئك عليهم لعنة الله والملائكة والناس أجمعين خالدين فيها لا يخفف عنهم العذاب ولا هم ينظرون وإلهكم إله واحد لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار والفلك التي تجري في البحر بما ينفع الناس والفلك التي تجري في البحر بما ينفع الناس وما أنزل الله من السماء من ماء فأحيا به الأرض بعد موتها وبث فيها من كل دابة وتصريف الرياح والسحاب المسخر بين السماء والأرض لآيات لقوم يعقلون ومن الناس من يتخذ من دون الله أندادا يحبونهم كحب الله والذين آمنوا أشد حبا لله ولو يرى الذين ظلموا إذ يرون العذاب أن القوة لله جميعا وأن الله شديد العذاب إذ تبرأ الذين اتبعوا من الذين اتبعوا ورأوا العذاب وتقطعت بهم الأسباب وقال الذين اتبعوا لو أن لنا كرة فنتبرأ منهم كما تبرأوا منا كذلك يريهم الله أعمالهم حسرات عليهم وما هم بخارجين من النار يا أيها الناس كلوا مما في الأرض حلالا طيبا ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين إنما يأمركم بالسوء والفحشاء وأن تقولوا على الله ما لا تعلمون وإذا قيل لهم اتبعوا ما أنزل الله قالوا بل نتبع ما ألفينا عليه آباءنا أولو كان آباؤهم لا يعقلون شيئا ولا يهتدون ومثل الذين كفروا كمثل الذي ينعق بما لا يسمع إلا دعاء ونداء صم بكم عمي فهم لا يعقلون يا أيها الذين آمنوا كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم واشكروا لله إن كنتم إياه تعبدون. إنما حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل به لغير الله، فمن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فلا إثم عليه، إن الله غفور رحيم. إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزل الله من الكتاب ويشترون به ثمنا قليلا أولئك ما يأكلون في بطونهم إلا النار ولا يكلمهم الله يوم القيامة ولا يزكيهم ولهم عذاب أليم. أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى والعذاب بالمغفرة، فما أصبرهم على النار. ذلك بأن الله نزل الكتاب بالحق وإن الذين اختلفوا في الكتاب لفي شقاق بعيد. ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين، وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب، وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس، أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم القصاص في القتلى، الحر بالحر والعبد بالعبد والأنثى بالأنثى، فمن عفي له من أخيه شيء فاتباع بالمعروف وأداء إليه بإحسان، ذلك تخفيف من ربكم ورحمة، فمن اعتدى بعد ذلك فله عذاب أليم. ولكم في القصاص حياة يا أولي الألباب لعلكم تتقون. كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن ترك خيرا الوصية للوالدين والأقربين بالمعروف حقا على المتقين. فمن بدله بعدما سمعه فإنما إثمه على الذين يبدلونه إن الله سميع عليم. فمن خاف من موص جنفا أو إثما فأصلح بينهم فلا إثم عليه إن الله غفور رحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون أياما معدودات. فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصم ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون. صدق الله العظيم. Now, inshallah, Sheikh Saim Asif will join us for Tafseer al-Quran, so please stand by.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد وقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن العظيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله لا يستحي أن يضرب مثلا ما بعوضة فما فوقها فأما الذين آمنوا فيعلمون أنه الحق من ربهم وأما الذين كفروا فيقولون ماذا أراد الله بهذا مثلا يضل به كثيرا ويهدي به كثيرا وما يضل به إلا الفاسقين صدق الله العظيم. My dear respected brothers and sisters, from the great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again to be here and talking and listening about the Quran. As we all know, there's a famous hadith in which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه, that the best of you is the one who learns the Quran and teaches it. And in another narration, the word, instead of and wa, the word aw is used, meaning the best of you is the one who learns the Quran or teaches it. And of course, learning the Quran and teaching the Quran includes the words of the Quran as well, which is, mashallah, Hafiz Abaidullah, Hafizahullah, he's doing every single day, mashallah, for so many years and years upon years, decades, teaching how to recite the Quran, tajweed, etc. And it also includes the tafseer, the meanings of the Quran as well. So inshallah, by us taking part in this gathering, we will hopefully, inshallah, we hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He includes us from amongst those people that His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that they are the best of the people. Moving forward, just to quickly go over what we went over yesterday. The day before, we had mentioned the wisdom behind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using huruf muqatta'at, those letters that nobody can understand. And we'll mention some points today, which are related, sort of. But going into the next ayah, we mentioned that we noticed the power and the surety of these opening verses, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right from the get-go, He negates any sort of doubt in the authenticity of this Quran and the fact that it is directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you note that this is not just a mere claim without any proof, right? If you're making such a claim, right, especially right in the beginning of the book, then there has to be some sort of proof. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives that proof later on, which is the verse we will be talking about today, inshallah, which I recited yesterday and explained a little bit. The verse which challenges the Arabs to bring a Quran like it. That itself is a proof that there is no doubt in the Quran, the fact that it is directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So right off the bat, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is stating, He's clearly delineating that there is absolutely no doubt in this book. And on top of that, He says, this is hudal lil muttaqin, that this book has guidance. This book contains the truth. And we mentioned how our society nowadays has completely diluted the truth to the extent that it has become something which is subjective. There are many truths. This person's can follow his religion, and it can also be true. This person can follow his religion, and it can also be true. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the truth with a capital T is in this book. The true guidance is in this book, in the Quran, right? And there's only one true guidance. Cannot say that that the religion of Christianity is true as well, the religion of Judaism as well. It's just illogical, because all three of these religions are at odds with each other. They all are their messages conflict with each other. So how can all of them be true at once? So what people are claiming nowadays, it's actually against logic as well. Then in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us in this ayah who will truly benefit from the Quran. And in the forthcoming ayat, I mentioned that He also mentions the disbelievers, and He mentions the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, and He mentions that basically those are people who will not benefit from the Quran. So right in the beginning of the Quran, He mentions who's going to benefit from this Quran. and who will not benefit from it. And inshallah, that will be something we'll talk more about today in another verse, inshallah. and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, so he says, Hudan lil muttaqeen, that this book is a guidance for the people who have taqwa. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have taqwa right now. Many ulama mentioned that it means as-sa'irina ila taqwa, because the question might come, why would Allah make it a guidance just for those people who already have taqwa? They already have the purpose is to get taqwa. So if they already have taqwa, then what's the point of making the Quran only a guidance for those people who already have it? So some ulama mentioned that what this means is as-sa'irina ila taqwa, those who are headed towards on the path towards gaining taqwa, right? So as long as we're putting ourselves on that path towards taqwa and we're seeking guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we will truly see the benefit from this Quran. Whereas on the other hand, if we have arrogance in our heart and we don't want to see guidance from anyone else, we just want to do we just want to go by what our own nafs tells us, our own self tells us. We just want to try to find what we want in the deen. That's what many people are doing nowadays. They want to justify their own desires through the deen, and so they search and search and search to try to find, an opinion. They will fatwa shopping to try to find an opinion that suits their desires. Whereas a hadith says, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به, that none of you will be a true believer until his desires become subject to that deen which I have brought. Meaning you don't put your desires above the deen and try to make the deen subject to your desires. Rather, it's the other way around. You make your desires subject to the deen, and you only do that which the deen tells you, and not try to project your own desires onto the deen and try to fulfill your own desires through the deen. Then those people will never truly benefit from the Quran, right? And actually, an ayah of the Quran tells us this as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سَأَصْرِفُ عَنْ آيَاتِيَ الَّذِينَ يَتَكَبَّرُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ, that I will turn away from the Quran those who are arrogant on the earth without any right to be arrogant. And Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, one of the pious salaf of the past, amongst the tabi'in or atba' tabi'in, he said, أَنْزِرُ عَنْهُمْ فَهْمَ الْقُرْآنِ. He said, what does it mean by Allah saying that I will turn them away from the Quran, away from my ayat? It means that I will take away the true understanding of the Quran. So if we have this mindset, this arrogant mindset that I'm going to find what I want in the Quran and I'm not truly seeking guidance, we'll never get benefit. But those who have tawadu, they have humility, they're seeking help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will truly get benefit from the Quran. And then I mentioned the link between this ayah and Ramadan is taqwa, right? And because in the month of Ramadan, we create taqwa in ourselves by what? Multiple means. The first mean I mentioned is in the ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that basically fasting, in this ayah we learned that fasting, it inculcates taqwa within us. And then in another ayah that I mentioned, that I read yesterday, which is the next ayah we're going into right now, Allah says that, He tells us to worship Him. He tells us what is going to be the end result of this worship is that we'll also build taqwa within you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So now the more worship we do in the month of Ramadan, the more fasting we do in the month of Ramadan, the more taqwa we gain. And so this ayah mentions the people who will truly benefit from the Quran are the muttaqeen. So inshallah, in the month of Ramadan, the more we do worship, the more we fast, the more benefit we will get from the Quran if we try to seek guidance from the Quran. And hopefully we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this session that we have, inshallah, is a means for that. Next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, I translated last time, we don't have enough time to go into it. But this ayah talks about 6 different reasons why mankind should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we will go over them quickly again. The fact that He's our Rabb, He takes care of everything for us. The fact that He created us, the fact that He created our ancestors, meaning our parents and those before them. The fact that He made earth a livable place for us. Despite the fact that despite it being round, despite it spinning at such a fast pace, we don't even feel it, and if we feel completely comfortable on the face of this earth. The fact that He made the skies means protection for us. We mentioned that the atmosphere protects us from meteors and the ozone layer protects us from harmful sun rays. Number 6 is the fact that he sends rain from which we grow our food, our fruits. So these are 6 things that Allah SWT mentions that we should worship him, 6 reasons. And obviously the reasons are unlimited, but these are just some things, some important things that Allah SWT has mentioned, and sometimes we may forget about these things. Then I went to the ayah. This is the ayah we will talk a little more about today. The challenge. So first, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established the importance and the obligation to worship him, which is the first part of the kalima, la ilaha illallah. There's none worthy of worship but Allah. Now the second part of the kalima is Muhammadur Rasulullah. So in the very next ayah, Allah establishes the prophethood of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and establishes that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is indeed a true prophet directly from Allah. And the proof that he brought is that if you have any doubt in the Quran, then produce a surah like it and call your helpers other than Allah if what you say is true. Now the logic behind it is that if it is a human, if it is a book which is written by a human, then it is definitely not only possible, but it is definite that you will find another book that will surpass it, or at least come near or be equal to it. Because if it is human, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was known not to be a person who reads or writes. Therefore, if there were many people who were probably known to be, they're more famous than him when it comes to poetry and things like that, and literature. So if they were, if this book was truly not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they would be able to bring something which is like it or even remotely close to it. And another reason is that I mentioned yesterday that there will be many contradictions in it. If it was from anyone besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they would have found many contradictions in it. But the fact is that they couldn't find anything which contradict each other in this Quran. They couldn't find anything which they could doubt in this Quran. Like I said, even though Allah in the beginning of the Quran he mentions the huruf al-muqatta'at, those letters which nobody even understands, they're just letters, but they couldn't even find a fault in that, right? Because it was so powerful, because it was so eloquent. So so that is the logic behind this proof of the prophethood of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And this challenge was at multiple levels. And we mentioned first they were challenged to bring a Quran like it. Then when they were unable to do so, then Allah said, okay, bring 10 surahs like it. And when they were unable to do even that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, okay, bring a surah like it, a single surah. And we mentioned that the shortest surah is 3 ayahs. So all they had to do was bring a surah of 3 ayahs. And history is testimony that a couple of people have tried. Musaylama al-Kadhdhab, Ibn Muqaffa, a couple of names of people that had tried to bring something like the Quran, but now their works are only preserved as a laughing stock. People just look at them and they laugh at them. And if anyone wants, they can check the books of Tafseer. They mention under this ayah and other ayat some of what people tried to write challenging the Quran, and it was a complete laughing stock. And obviously they never prevailed. And the fact that they never prevailed is the proof that nobody ever prevailed is that it has never reached us, and no news, not even like a rumor of anything that has come near the Quran has reached us, even though it would become so famous, because now you're completely disavowing and you're proving an entire religion wrong, especially a religion that has gained so much power in such few years. Of course, it's going to spread, the word is going to spread, and that this religion is a fraud. But the fact of the matter is that it never happened, and it will never happen. And the interesting thing is that in this very ayah is one of the aspects of proof of Islam, and inshallah I will go more into that. So what are the miraculous aspects of the Quran? We keep hearing that the Quran is a miracle, it's a linguistic miracle, it's such an eloquent book that none of the Arabs could bring anything like it. But what are some of the points, like how can you prove that? Anybody can make a claim, but how can you logically prove that? Bring your evidence for that. So I mentioned earlier, I believe in the first session, I mentioned that there's a science which actually the science itself consists of 3 sciences. It's called al-balagha, it's called rhetoric. This science was solely founded and solely begun for the purpose of proving the miraculous nature of the Quran, proving that the Quran is a linguistic miracle. And there are three aspects of this miracle, and there are more, but they mentioned three main parts. Is that the linguistic miracle, the fact that the Quran was so eloquent that nobody could bring anything like it, and also the fact that the Quran has many prophecies predicting things of the future, and all those things came true. That also is another aspect of the miracle of the Quran. And then the scientific miracles, the ulama mentioned that as well. We'll go into a little more into detail of each of these, inshallah. So the first aspect, the linguistic miracle aspect. So like I said, an entire science was developed just for the purpose of proving the linguistic miracle of the Quran. So this, in reality, I cannot really explain to everybody the details of this unless they know the Arabic language. Only then you can have specific examples in mind. If you understand grammar, if you understand sarf, if you understand many aspects of the Arabic language, only then you could truly understand the linguistic miracle of the Quran. But you can still attempt at portraying it to everybody, inshallah. So the first one thing that the ulama mentioned how the Quran is a linguistic miracle is its comprehensiveness. The fact that okay, somebody might say, "Oh, how is it comprehensive? It's 600 pages," but in reality, these 600 pages they contain such meaning that we mentioned in the first session many different tafsir that the ulama have written, multiple volumes, literally some of them were hundreds of volumes long, like 100 volumes long, 200 volumes long, thousands and thousands of pages, 30,000 pages, 50,000 pages. These are all explaining what? Explaining this very Quran, which is only 600 pages. And every single tafsir is mentioning different things. It's not like everybody's saying the exact same thing. No, there's so many different opinions in these books of tafsir, and you'll see that each tafsir brings something unique that the other tafsir doesn't have. So imagine how much meaning, and these are not just meaningless things. These are all very deep and amazing points that we see in the books of tafsir. So now imagine that all of these meanings are coming from where? Coming from these same words, right? And you'll see that it's the most amazing thing is that I mentioned the statement of Maulana Yusuf bin Nouri that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals new knowledge about this kitab, about this book, in at every century, at every time that He had not revealed to any people before. Why? Because the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unlimited. So there's constant new knowledge of the Quran being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives it to the people. But that depends on their talab, their desire. If they truly have a desire and to show to Allah that Allah, we want to see guidance through your Quran, they make an attempt to understand it, then we will see that Allah will give us such amazing understanding of the Quran. This understanding will help us and guide us in our life. And it will protect us from all the fitnas that we see around us. And it will guide us to salvation. It will guide us to success in this life and the hereafter. But unfortunately, we have left the Quran. So going back to the Quran, so in every century, in every time, there are more and more meanings being discovered in this very Quran. And that is one of the scholars said that the fact that all the ayat have so many meanings and so many possible meanings. You always hear about, okay, there's a difference of opinion about this verse. It could have 3 possible meanings, 4 possible meanings, and all of them are equally possible. Maybe some might be more strong in terms of the Arabic language or the other, but nonetheless, all of them are equally possible. He said that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowledgeable. If it's a human being, you can't say that I said a sentence. For example, I just stated a sentence right now. I only meant one specific thing by the sentence, even if my speech was a little ambiguous and you could understand 2 or 3 things from it. At the end of the day, I'm a human being. I only meant one thing by it, right? So everybody can guess what I meant by it, but at the end of the day, I only meant one thing by it. But because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowledgeable, we can actually say that all these different meanings that are possible in the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant all of them. So that means that all of them are correct understandings of the verse. So imagine now that one verse can have 5, 6, 7 correct meanings. So now imagine this for all the 6,000 and so verses of the Quran. So it is so comprehensive that in these few ayat, so much meaning is there that volumes upon volumes, 200,000 plus volumes, not volumes, different books, and each book was so many different volumes of tafsir have been written. That is how much comprehensive there is in the meaning. And I mentioned Imam Razi, how he said we can extract 10,000 points just from Surah Fatiha, and then they didn't believe him. So then he started writing his tafsir, And then he successfully proved that. And then he said that after he wrote it, he said that this was just to help people understand the amount that can be, the sheer amount that can be gained from Surah Fatiha. Otherwise, even 10,000 is not enough. There's literally an unlimited amount of things you can extract just from Surah Fatiha. This is just a surah literally of 7 ayat. So that is one of the linguistic miracles of the Quran, is comprehensiveness. The fact that such few words can convey such large amounts of meaning. And the Arabs, they really considered that to be the highest level of eloquence. If somebody could convey a lot of meaning in few words. And that's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was also, his speech was also miraculous. He was known as Jawami al-Kalim. He had comprehensive speech. He would say few words, but you would see that the meaning is so deep that the books of hadith, the books of explanation of hadith, they'll go on pages and pages and pages, sometimes volumes, just for one hadith, right? For example, the hadith of Zara. There are literally so many different books written just to explain that one hadith. So that is an aspect of a miraculous aspect of the Quran, is its comprehensiveness. Then its consistency and excellence. So you see that whenever there's any good poet or any good speaker, it's never possible for this person to always be on top of his game. You see that there's always, this person always going to have a point where, oh, his poetry over here was amazing. This poem was his all-time great. And there's going to be some poems which were okay, they were decent. They weren't as good as they could be, and some poems were actually pretty bad. The reason for that is that the human mind, at the end of the day, Allah says, man has been created weak. The human mind by itself is weak. And so we see that sometimes, especially if you're a writer, you can relate to this, that sometimes you feel like you can write and write and write and write, and the thoughts are just coming to your mind. And it feels like everything is coming together perfectly, and you have the perfect rhythm, you have the perfect flow, and the right words are coming to your head, and everything is perfect. And so that's when you see that you're at your best. It could be the time of the day, or it could be that your mind is free from all like sadness or problems or anything like that, and you just can write and write and write. Or some people write better when they have more sadness or things like that. But whatever the case is, the situation is perfect. But then there are other times where you're distracted. Your mind can't think. There's something called writer's block. So your work is not as good as it can be. So then you see that sometimes maybe half your essay is really good, and then the other half is just okay because your mind wasn't there, and it's not possible for you to write perfectly all the time. That at that excellent stage all the time. But the amazing thing about the Quran is it is not like that at all. And you can see this in any work, actually, not just poetry, but just all writing in general. You see that sometimes an author can write amazing, and sometimes you'll see it's not so good. But the amazing thing and the miraculous nature of the Quran is its consistency and excellence. In every single portion of the Quran, it is miraculous, and it is at the highest level of eloquence, and you don't see any mistakes in it in terms of grammar. Every single person, if you check, you'll find typos, you'll find some sort of mistake, but you don't see any mistake whatsoever in the entire Quran. So that is another aspect of the linguistic miracle of the Quran. Another is lack of archaic language. So especially, for example, just take Shakespeare. That's the easiest thing to understand for those who have studied Shakespeare in school. You see that so many words are not in the English language, that they're not used anymore. But you see, the Quran was revealed over 1400 years ago, and yet all the words that are used in the Quran are still in normal use today. And if a person uses it, then other people will understand it. And the amazing thing is, not just the Arabs will understand it, but you see that the Arabic language has become an international language for the Muslims, especially for the scholarly community. So a person from China could be a person from China, or a person from Burma, or any country. They can be speaking in Arabic, and another person from America, for example, who has learned Arabic, or any other country, they will all understand this person, because the Quranic language is still in complete use today and has not become outdated. It has not need to be updated. Rather, all its words are still in use today. So that is another miraculous aspect of the Quran. Then another miraculous aspect of the Quran is its uniqueness. And that was a very hard point and this was the main thing that the Arabs couldn't bring. the Quran style was completely unique. There's literally, until now, there's nothing that can be even compared to it. You see that the style is completely is not unlike is not like any poetry, prose, or speech that they had. They had three different styles generally in the Arabic language during that time, and even until now, there's three, or you could say four different styles. Some of them I'll say that there are four different styles in Arabic. First is poetry, and poetry has many rules. It's there has to be certain number of syllables in each line, and then there's different ozan, there's different meters of poetry as well. There are a lot of rules for poetry, and the Quran did not follow any of these rules. There's not poetry whatsoever, because you can't say it's poetry, even though many of the verses are rhyming. You still can't say it's poetry because it was not following any of the rules of the poetry. It was nothing like poetry, so they couldn't say it was poetry. Then we see prose. Prose is just general speech, like I am speaking right now. That would be considered prose as well. And general writing is prose. So and we see that the Quran doesn't fit in this as well, because it doesn't fit the normal styles of prose that the Arabs had at the time. And the third style of speaking is when they're giving a speech, right? And they were known to give very powerful speeches, and they would have rhyming speeches as well. But you see that the Quran did not have that style either of speech. And in some of them I add a fourth style, which is writing letters, right? But we see that the Quran obviously wasn't a letter written from one person to another as well. So now the Quran is completely and utterly unique in every single aspect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought a completely new style that they were not used to. Yet, and usually if there's a new thing, then maybe it might take time to get used to, and it's like an acquired taste or something like that. So people in the beginning, they're like, oh, what is this? I don't want to listen to this. But it was so amazing that everybody was just astonished. We mentioned an example of Al-Walid ibn Mughira, one of the staunchest enemies of Islam. Yet when he's listening to the Quran, he's just amazed, and he's saying, "Inna fihi la halawa." It has some sweetness in it, and it has it's so amazing that it cannot be overcome by anything, any other speech. And then the other disbelievers were so afraid that he's going to accept Islam now, because he is so swayed by the word of the Quran. And many disbelievers would actually listen to the Quran in secret because they were so amazed by it. And the poets of that time, one of them is Labid, radiallahu anhu. His poetry was so great that the Arabs had a habit that when somebody's poetry was great, well, the greatest of all poetry, they would hang his poem on the Kaaba, because the Kaaba, obviously, they also believed it was a holy place as well. So the best of all the poetry they would hang on the Kaaba, and there were 7 specific poems that were hung on the Kaaba. These are not just small poems; they're like 100, 120 line long poetry, and these poems are still preserved till today. So this Labid, radiallahu anhu, one of his poems was hung on the Kaaba. So he had the honor of being. You could kind of compare it to like the top 10 music charts, something like that. But this is a much greater thing, because this is amongst all the Arabs now. And so he had the honor of being hung on the Kaaba, and so his poetry was so great. But then once he heard the Quran, he literally just stopped writing poetry completely, even though it must have been his life. But as soon as he heard the Quran, he completely stopped writing poetry, because he said that after somebody asked him too, that after you became Muslim, you never said any poetry ever again. And he said that after hearing the Quran, what need is there for any poetry? So you see that the Quran is so unique that it was unlike any sort of poetry, prose, or speech that the Arabs were used to. And what was more amazing is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the fact that he was unlettered, he was not known to be a poet. Um, so they tried to say that that he's a sha'ir, he's a poet, but at the end of the day, they couldn't prove that, and they knew themselves deep down that he wasn't a poet, because this is not any poetry. And that's actually a hikmah of Allah, that Allah didn't make Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam a poet. Like we said that many of the people of the Arabs of the past were poets, but Allah did not make Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam a poet. He says, وَمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ الشِّعْرَ وَمَا يَنْبَغِي لَهُ. We did not teach our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam poetry, and nor does it befit him. And what is the reason for this? The reason is that if he had known poetry before, then people can just say now this Quran is just another form of poetry. But our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was not a poet. And so there's a difference of opinion amongst ulama if Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever even said poetry. A lot of ulama say that he never said any poetry himself in his life. Yes, he did say some poetry. He was quoting other people, but as for making his own poetry, sometimes he had speech which would rhyme, and it was just coincidental, but it wasn't necessarily poetry. So so this is another aspect of the linguistic miracle of the Quran, is its uniqueness, the fact that it's completely different than any other style. And obviously, for those who know the Arabic language, and they know how the meters of poetry work, they will see the difference between the Quran and the style of poetry. Then we see the perfect choice of words. This is something that might take some time. I'll just try to go into it very briefly. But it's so amazing that every single verse of the Quran is literally, every single word in the Quran is chosen perfectly. And there is no word in the Quran that we can say that, oh, if only this other word was used, then it would have been better, because this word fits the situation better. And that's an extremely high level of eloquence, right? Because you can always critique. You'll always have people critiquing. If you have somebody proofreading your work, your writing work, you'll always have somebody saying that, no, I think you should use this word instead of this word. You should use this word instead of this word. You should use this word instead of this word. But in the Quran, nobody can claim that there's one word that's used that's less eloquent than the other word. Even if all the most eloquent people in the entire world to try to proofread, so to say, the Quran, they would never be able to say that, okay, no, instead of using this word should have been used, and that would have been more eloquent. That would have been better to use. No, every single word that Allah used in the Quran is perfect. And I mentioned an example you can see on the slide here is the word istabrak. So we know that in general the Arabic language is more eloquent than other languages. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically chose it for the Quran to be revealed in it. But now there are actually some words in the Quran which are borrowed from other languages, right? There are some words that are borrowed from Farsi, from Persian language. There's some that are borrowed from Habashi, and there are different languages that the words are borrowed from other languages. Aramaic, right? The names of the prophets, a lot of them were Aramaic. So there are words that in the Quran that are in their asl, their roots are actually in other languages. So now somebody actually made an objection against the Quran. They said that, how come Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought this word istabrak? This word istabrak has a root, I believe, in the Farsi language. So why can so why was a non-Arabic word used in the Quran, whereas Arabic in general is more eloquent than the non-Arabic language, than the non-Arabic language? So the fact that a non-Arabic word was used in the Quran shows that the Quran is not the most eloquent speech. Therefore, it is not the speech of Allah. Obviously, this person was wrong, but that was his claim. So then one of the scholars, Al-Khuwayhi, and Imam Suyuti rahimahullah mentions this in one of his book called Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, to show the perfection of the Quran in its usage of every single word. He proved that the word istabrak is the perfect word to be used in that situation, and there's no other word in the Arabic language that could ever have done the job that this word had done, even though it was from a different language besides the Arabic language. So every single word Allah used, whether it's from the Arabic language or the non-Arabic language, it was the perfect word to be used there, and there's no other word that could have been used that was better. And so I'm going to briefly explain how that's the case for this word. Obviously, I can't do full justice because, again, not everybody here understands the Arabic language, but briefly going into it. So istabrak, what does istabrak mean? Istabrak is a thick type of silk. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this word to describe the silk of the people of Jannah. يَلْبَسُونَ مِن سُندُسٍ وَإِسْتَبْرَقٍ مُتَقَابِلِينَ. Also mentions that the people of Jannah, they'll be wearing two types of silk. One is sundus, it is a more light type of silk, then وَإِسْتَبْرَقٍ مُتَقَابِلِينَ, and they'll be facing each other. They'll be wearing both these different types of silk. So now, this scholar, he went into some detail. He said that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hikmah dictates that if he wanted to induce his slaves, and he wanted to give them zeal towards worshiping him, then he should talk about both punishment and also reward. So then he talked about Jannah. So now when he talks about Jannah, then he's always going to mention a few important things that everybody always loves to have. And what are those things? The first is having amazing, great houses, right? Everybody strives for that. Then having amazing food, very tasty food. Then al-masharib al-haniyya, having great drinks as well, tasty drinks. ثم الملابس الرفيعة, and also talking about having fancy clothing. And then also talking about sexual desires as well. So these are the few 4 or 5 things, the main things that people look for when they're looking for luxury, they're looking for pleasure. So he said that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to induce his slave and to give them zeal towards to build this desire in them to do good action and to worship him, then he should talk about these things in Jannah. So he did talk about these things. So then and there are many different people have different tastes. So sometimes if Allah talked about the good houses, then maybe somebody's like, okay, I'm not so much into houses, into palaces, even though Allah mentioned such amazing palaces. What about what's there with food? And if some people are like, oh, I'm not such a big fan of food, and I'm not a foodie, so to say. So then the person can say that, okay, we can talk about the drinks of Jannah, and then so on and so forth. And then sooner or later, there'll be some people who are most interested in the clothing of Jannah. They just really love clothing. So so now once we go into clothing, now there are a few options. But maybe we can say that the clothing can be made of gold, but generally you can't have really clothing which is made of gold because that's just not practical. Obviously in Jannah it is practical, but it won't be comfortable because, I mean, why would you want clothing made of gold? Then now then we're talking about, okay, let's say it's not gold, it's any other cloth. So generally, if you have clothing, you don't want it to be so thick, right? Whenever it's fat and thick, it's kind of annoying. That's why people usually prefer to have lighter clothing that will be easier to wear, right? So the more lighter the clothing is, generally, the better it is. But the thing is with harir, with silk, the opposite is true. That the heavier the silk is, the better and more valuable it will be, and the more comfortable it will be for the person. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's going to, he said if he wants to mention the best of all clothing, then he has to mention silk, and he has to mention that there's some sort of heavy silk as well. But the thing is, if you look in the Arabic language, you can keep looking and looking and looking, but you won't find any word that talks about heavy silk. I mean, their reasons could be many. Allahu A'lam. It could be that they didn't have that type of silk in the Arab Peninsula at the time. But there's no word in the Arabic language which conveys that meaning of a silk which is more thick and heavy. Rather, they just had general words. Okay, there's silk, there's harir, there's dibaj, but there's no word that specifically conveys the meaning of a thick form of silk. So, and that word is only found in the Farsi language, or whichever language this word was taken from. So once that word was taken, istabrak, now we see that it fits perfectly with the ayah, even with the sound of the ayah as well. It doesn't sound off. It doesn't sound like, okay, what? This sounds like it's completely different from the rest of the Quran. No, it fits in perfectly, beautifully with the rest of the Quran. But it's literally the perfect choice, and there could not have been any other word used, even if from the Arabic language, which was better than this word. So that shows a perfect choice of words of the Quran. Then we see the perfect placement of words as well, right? There are many times where somebody might think that, oh, the way this verse was worded, it could have been worded differently. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala worded everything perfectly, and the ulama have actually, there are many books that are dedicated to this topic of the miraculous nature of the Quran. So the ulama have explained these things, that why this verse was worded in this particular way. Then another miraculous nature of the Quran is its effectiveness and power. How even a person who doesn't understand the Arabic language, when he hears the Quran recited in a beautiful voice, it just has so much power and effect on his heart. That is only possible for speech that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the fact that listening to this Quran can be a means of literally changing somebody's life. So many people have maybe just heard this Quran being recited and accepted Islam without even knowing what it means, but it just has so much power in it. That is another proof of its miraculous nature. then that covers the linguistic miracle. Obviously, there's so much more. Like I said, there's entire science dedicated to it, and many tafsir which are dedicated to this linguistic miracle of the Quran. There's actually some tafsir which were written just for this purpose. So the entire tafsir of the Quran is just showing the linguistic miracle of the Quran. But now, in case somebody says that, oh, I don't know the Arabic language, so how can I understand this linguistic miracle? Well, it can be explained like this. But if they don't see that, then they can also see the prophecies that this Quran has, which have come true. In Surah Al-Rum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prophesies about the victory of the Romans over the Persians, and you can go more into detail on that in the books of Tafsir. And you see the this ayah itself is actually a prophecy. Why? Allah says, in the next ayah it says, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا. And if you don't do, if you're not able to do this, meaning bring a Quran like this Quran, and then he says, وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا, and you'll never be able to do it. So Allah has told them already, you're never going to be able to do it. Now all it will take is one person to come and bring something like the Quran, and then the whole Quran is finished. We can say that this Quran is false. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has proven it, and to this day nobody has come. Another prophecy you could say the Quran that was fulfilled in the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is the fact that Allah says Tabbat yada Abi Lahabin wa tab, that Abu Lahab has perished. Basically, it talks about how he's doomed for the hellfire. So imagine all Abu Lahab would have to do, at that time, during the time of Nabi Sallallahu, there were so many years between his death and the time that this ayah was revealed. These verses were revealed. So imagine all Abu Lahab, he was a staunch enemy of Islam. All he had to do was to say, I believe in Islam. If he said that I believe in Islam, then the Quran would be proved wrong. Why? Because Allah said in the Quran that Abu Lahab is doomed to hellfire forever. So imagine now, all he had to say, even if he wouldn't say it, mean it from the heart, all he had to say from his tongue was, I believe in Allah and the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then he could say, look, your Quran says this, that Abu Lahab is doomed to the hellfire. But you see, I'm saying I'm believing in Islam. So, and you say that the person who believes in Islam is going to heaven. So therefore, your Quran is wrong, and there's a contradiction in your Quran, and the prophecy that your Quran had is completely wrong. But you see that Abu Lahab did not accept Islam, and he died upon kufr, and all he had to do was just claim it, and he would have proved the ayah wrong. So that is another prophecy of the Quran, and there are a few others as well. Then the scientific miracle of the Quran. This is a topic which has become more famous lately. You see many people trying to prove the Quran from a scientific aspect, and there are some ulama of the past who did they did look into this aspect, and you see that they talk in front of nowadays. They say that the Big Bang theory is proven in the Quran. They use an ayah. There's a lot of difference of opinion about that, and other things. They say that even the talk Allah mentions about cars and planes in the Quran. He says that he talks about how he has made horses and mules and also donkeys, and he has made them as a means of transport for you and a means of beauty. So now we see that. And then he says after that, he will create that which you don't know about. So people say that is actually an indication towards that Allah will create other forms of transportation which we don't know, but which they didn't know about currently. And they say that's referring to planes and cars. And then there are other ayat as well, talking about the splitting of the sea, Maraj al-Bahraini al-Taqiyan, where the two seas meet, and many other things that the ulama have mentioned. So there is definitely basis to this, and we know that since the Quran is definitely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know that whatever it's going to talk about is going to be true, it's going to be accurate. And there are things which are mentioned which coincide with scientific things. Yes, that is definitely there. But at the same time, many ulama, they caution that we shouldn't base our belief in the Quran on science. Why? Because science is something which is constantly changing. And we see that theories that 50 years ago, they seem to be rock solid, and it was seen to be that it was irrefutable. Now, 50 years later, there's so much evidence against it, and people laugh at somebody who would espouse these same beliefs, the same theory that people 50 years ago held to so staunchly. And another thing is like science. We can see that it is fueled by lobbies as well. So sometimes they have researches that are, you could say, biased, and their findings are not completely accurate. Obviously, you have peer research as well, but the point is that science is not something which is termed in Islamic sciences as qat'i. It is not something which you can say for sure that it is 100% yaqeen, that it is rock solid true, and it will never change. Rather, it's constantly changing. So now let's say, for example, another research comes that says that, oh, this so-called scientific miracle of the Quran is actually not scientific, is against what we found now, this new research that we found. Are we going to say that, oh, the Quran is wrong now because the science says no? We're not going to say that. So we take it with a grain of salt, and we know that science is something which is always changing. Therefore, we don't have to. Our science doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be completely matching with the Quran, because again, science is always changing. That's just an important thing to keep in mind when talking about scientific. There's no problem talking about scientific miracles of the Quran, but we have to keep this in mind. We can't make it a basis. That's what some people have done, unfortunately. They made it a basis for their faith, just looking at the scientific miracles of the Quran. Whereas the other proofs and of the Quran we have are much stronger. I want to go into the next ayah, but inshallah, will suffice for that today. Tomorrow we'll go into this the next ayah or two ayahs after this, and then after that we will go into a more I guess you could say we'll go into a more general the theme of Surah Baqarah, because we don't want to be on Surah Baqarah for the entirety of the time, even though there are so many amazing points that we can gain from this surah. But what I wanted to talk about is what Allah SWT mentioned in Surah Baqarah so much, especially in the first juz. He mentions different story about the Bani Israel, about the people of the children of Israel, and all the different sins and bad things that they did. I want to speak about what we can learn from all these different things. So inshallah, hopefully we'll go into that tomorrow, and then maybe then after that we can go into the next surah, Surah Al Imran, and the surahs after that, inshallah. Just take a couple points from each surah. I just wanted to spend more time in Surah Baqarah, Surah Fatiha, because this is the beginning of the Quran, and like I mentioned, Allah is establishing our foundations right from the get-go. So I thought it was important to go into details in these things, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us conviction in the trueness of this religion, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us a true understanding of all these ayat. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.